Welcome back from lunch into our afternoon practical how-to sessions. Branding and climate often conjure up ideas of greenwashing. So how do you redesign a brand or give it an uplift in an authentic low-carbon way? OPX Studio, a strategic brand and communication studio, will be walking us through two case studies on just that. And their founders, David and Francis, are here to share all of their insights so that we can apply some of these sustainability learnings as well. David is creative director at OPX Studio, leading the design team. David is passionate about design, hosting the podcast Create Great, and curating the design showreel Vicel. Frances is founder of OPX Studio also, and she drives the direction of the studio and our work within the organisation, who are making a positive difference to society and to the environment. An expert in brand and communication, she's experienced in delivering brand programmes and campaigns. OPX Studio worked closely with the Design Council to launch their brand film and refreshed visual brand identity, supporting their Design for Planet strategy. So this is really interesting, and hopefully we can talk more on this as well after, but we've got some great case studies to go through today. So I'll hand it over to David to talk us through this now.
Thank you, Alicia. So hello, everyone. Can't see everyone, but I'm sure there's plenty of you out there. So really, OPX Studio, I'm going to talk about climate conscious creativity as opposed to branding. And I suppose that's something we've always been really interested in since its sort of inception at OPX. And it's always been at the forefront of whenever we approach a project, be it a brand project or a pure design project or a digital. So climate conscious creativity with collaboration at the heart of it. And as Alicia said, we've got two projects to take you through, one being a physical and one being a digital. The physical is the same client as the digital, and I'll get onto that and talk through what that's about. So what is conscious creativity? For us, it's really about thinking about repurposing, reusing, and rethinking exhibition design. As I mentioned, the client was an arts-based client and in the education sector, and this was the collaboration. It is between us, OPX Studio, Mallard and Claret, a digital pure play digital agency, and the University London College of Communications. So we had that at the heart of everything. One thing to talk about is actually how the project came about. So the project came about from an Instagram feed, and it was one of the designers who was at OPX Studio at the time noticed it. And it was a cool, sort of an open call to arms and a rallying call from LCC to get either designers or studios to pitch an idea. And we were quite excited about that. And we thought, okay, we're going to go for it. So we actually thought about what the idea could be. And we looked at different ways of sort of thinking about what that could be. And the idea that came out of it was the concept, which was 100% LCC. And that really stems from the fact that a few of the members of the design team at OPX Studio were from LCC. Both myself and Francis, the founder, are from LCP, which changed a few years back. And we really like this idea of that kind of circularity in design, where we've learned ideas from LCP, we've gone into the real world, and now we're taking that thinking initially from LCP and replaying it. As I mentioned, it was a pitch, but what we wanted to do with this pitch as well is set ourselves our own brief. And our brief to ourselves was, can you create a degree show that has sustainability running through it? And I suppose when we think of degree shows or any exhibitions, we think of large scale, we think about vinyls, we think about other bits that you can use. But the one thing we actually thought, well, hold on. There's a wealth of either creativity from alumni like ourselves or the students. Wouldn't it be great to encapsulate that all in an actual exhibition? And thinking about actually how the first thing you're ever going to see from the exhibition, how can you create something on a huge canvas that people would actually recognize? And is there a clever way, is there a creative way of actually thinking about how we can create impact? So we actually sort of stepped back and thought about everyday solutions. So as I mentioned, instead of having huge vinyls, which are plastic, not good for the planet, is there a more creative approach to actually showing a degree show? And the idea we came up with was like whitewashing. So can we whitewash the whole exhibition space, almost have little circles or little holes in there so then people can peer in, so we can get this idea of creativity going on. And then using our skills or either ex-alumni or sign writers to actually create the 100% LCC. So immediately the idea of the creative conscious creativity was being at the forefront, going, let's not do this. Let's not just create waste for waste's sake. Let's think about it in a clever, unique way. And that was taken through the whole of the journey of the exhibition. So actually thinking about if there are any offcuts or are there any like broken furniture, can that become part of the exhibition as well? Do we use tape? Do we use white tape on the steps instead of having vinyl? Do we hand paint things? So we could always thinking about ways of actually reusing as well. And one of the ideas, which was a really nice idea, was there's two shows. So instead of vinyl, can we actually hand paint? So can we hand paint on the score of media? And then when that show finishes, paint on top of it the design studio date on there as well. So thinking about how that signage can work as well. Thinking about what we can repurpose and reuse, as I mentioned earlier. So thinking about screen printing, most designers love screen printing. It's sort of a nod back to the university as well, but actually get the teachers involved in it and get the students involved in it. And a part of the idea, and you'll see later on when we actually when we won the project and we started talking to the students and the actual members of staff, it was something they really, really embraced. So the image on the right-hand side is actually, we're looking at materials. Is there something from the printing school that we can use? And it later transpired when we went there, they have these huge printing beds that already have print on it. And we told the screen printers the ideas and they thought, that's a great idea. We'd love to help you with that. But even to the screens, or the guy on the left-hand side, the screens, we were thinking about screen printing on the actual walls. Is there a water-based solution that we can use, that we can put on the walls? And actually then can we put the screens on the walls as well? So we wanted the exhibition to feel handmade, because as designers, years ago, that's what we used to do. We used to use our hands a lot. Now we use a lot of machines. So how can we use the hands? How can you make it a physical experience as well? Are there things we can print on? Are there aprons? Are there bits of materials? Are there fabrics? So using the typography and that you sort of really strong sort of, they're repurposing, they're reusing it. How does that fit within the college? And one thing that transpired is after we pitched the idea to the LCC, part of their drive was for sustainability. And what they liked about the work was how creative thinking can overcome, unpurposeful things like vinyl and stuff. So they really enjoyed that. So yes, we could do some screen printed posters. We wouldn't do a lot. We just do a few one-offs. But one of the things as well, which was super important within the show, was the sort of signage. Around the college, you have lots and lots of signage. So is there a way of actually giving a nod back to the university, the idea of the printing presses? So the exhibition could be used this way, and thinking how that works. And then we wanted to, the show, we didn't want it to be superimposing on the actual artworks and the students' work. So any digital screens we'd have, they'd always be sort of set away from it, and then we can play the films. And then obviously across social, and hopefully you can see here, the idea of actually students partaking in it. We wanted that collaboration. We wanted them to see that actually this is a live brief. It's great for the folios. It's a great into the design industry as well. So we went in with an idea, 100% LCC. It was a strong theme. It seemed to really, really resonate, and we won the work, which was super. It was really good. So then we had to make it real, didn't we? So we went down and tested the concepts, and there I am. Look, alumni, slightly looking nervous, slightly with longer hair as well. But it is really looking at how we can actually take some of these ideas and push them into reality. So screen printing on the walls, looking at, as I mentioned earlier, the printers beds. So can we actually have those hanging? You know, looking at size of type, thinking about how we actually hand paint it, hand render it. And as I said, there's a really nice buzz about it, and a really beautiful sort of collaboration at the core of everything. And then obviously the climate conscious creativity was the thread. But then obviously we all know what happened, that COVID happened, and then unfortunately the work didn't happen, which was a shame. But that kind of raised the question and sort of took us into a new space. And it's something that the college actually started thinking about, this idea of a blended space between a physical and a digital, and how we would take that on to online as well. So with that in mind, we came up with this idea for a project called Without Form. And Without Form, really, the name came from this idea of a fluid exhibition space, you know, no parameters, you know, no restrictions, maybe one or two, which we'll get into, but it's very much an open platform. So how do you create an experience on a platform that doesn't cost the earth, really? So yeah, how do you create a low impact, accessible site without compromising the experience? And what we did, as I mentioned, it was a live brief. We interviewed students. From UX, UI backgrounds, from photography, filmmaking, and hopefully you can see this film. This should give you an insight into it. It is really, that goes back to the whole collaboration, thinking about what a low carbon site could be, what are the parameters we can work in, what is it that we can actually deliver and make awareness of as well, because it's something that we are learning, both myself, Francis, and the design team, because we weren't experts in this. You know, to say you're an expert in it is, you know, quite putting your head above the parapet. We're learning about it. We want to know a bit more as well. So how can we do it? And as I mentioned, restrictions. Well, this was one. We live in a world of gigabytes, you know, 20 gig sims here, hard drives are getting bigger, everything's getting bigger. But can we create a site that is actually, I don't know, 5 megs? At the time when we mentioned it, you know, internally, it was like, you can't do a lot with 5 megs. And it's like, well, that's the point. You know, what is the sort of the bare minimum experience? And you'll notice just down the bottom, I've got the numbers 480K. You know, that's a mid-sized JPEG. And that was actually the code to build the site was delivered at 480K. So it wasn't even 5 meg. So I was amazed, and so was the team. But we had a guiding principle across everything, and that was keep it simple, but obviously make it great. So with that in mind, and the students and the design team, we set about actually creating Without Form. So we had 3 creative challenges. We had type, image, and color. Each decision we made would be based on an energy consumption as well. So we had to think about, are we going to load things like Google fonts? What colors do we use? How much creative things can we use? Gradients, rounded corners, bevels, drop shadows, custom fonts, that all got scrapped. And it really became almost a pure design site. So with type, and I'll step through each of the 3 with type. Obviously, you've got system fonts. As I mentioned, and we didn't want to do Google fonts. We didn't want to load other fonts because that all becomes code. Code then becomes bigger. Things become too much within that space of the green. So we wanted to restrict ourselves. And from that, we started thinking about, okay, system fonts, what will work, what's universal? We landed on Microsoft Sans. which we've never used before ever. We didn't want to use aerial and things like that. So we landed on Microsoft Stands, which actually only had one weight. And it goes a bit back to the sort of learnings at university at LCC about typographic hierarchies. And that's what we used a lot within the site. So it wasn't using weights, we're looking at typographic hierarchies. With imagery, what can we do? Remember, it's going to be an exhibition art site, so imagery is probably the most important thing that the exhibitor wants to show. But how can we embrace these technical restrictions? The research that the students, Matt and Christine from the design school, looked at was also thinking about bitmap images. The bitmap images, can you deliver those, but then give the functionality of the user, if they want to see the full color, to click on it, and then that gets downloaded. So we're always thinking about sort of the call and response of the download times and the site and the weight of it. Color was really important as well. Blue, it's not a good color. We didn't know this. You see a lot of this kind of electric blue around on sites, but apparently from the research, I think it was about 30, it consumes 35% more than other colors. So that naturally led us to a more black and white neutral world. So we've got the color or lack of color, we've got the black and white, we've got the type, and then we've got our bitmapped images. And then what we wanted to do was also think about accessibility, dark modes, having control of the type sizes, offering up the choices as well for the user. As I mentioned earlier, it's very, we were learning, and the whole point of it was for LCC to learn and the students to learn, and just the viewer to be aware that a site, and if you're one of those bad creatives or people out there who have all those tabs open on your web browser, even though they're not active, they're still putting data. So you're still putting data. So we're just mentioning things like that about being in control. Something we did, which was really, really nice as well, is you'll see a timer next to the cursor. Back to the awareness. We wanted people to be aware of how much time they're on a site for. And basically is the type getting smaller and smaller. And then if you left it for about, I think it was about an hour, and you went back to the site, it was just like this big number changing. You couldn't actually see the work. So that was always getting bigger. As I mentioned, it's all about, awareness and how it comes together. And then this is what it looked like. So we used our building blocks. We wanted to create this exhibition space. We wanted it to have some motion, but that could be controlled by the user if they wanted to have it on or off. The bitmaps to the color, the typography and how that all works together. We introduced the slider as well, so you could either see 50-50, or if you wanted to read more, the image goes down and the type comes up bigger. Not everything we wanted to do was with it black and white, and you'll see here we did have some color coming through, just so when you're on there and you scroll through things, you kind of see what you come to as well. And that's a bit of the gatekeeping at the bottom, the simplified layouts. If you want to make the type bigger, do you want to make it dark mode or do you want to make it light mode? So we're learning all this stuff, which was great. And then there's, we've been practicing that as well. But the one crucial thing also was about green hosting. It's like, it's great having a site that says it's, low carbon, but actually it's not being hosted on a green server. So there's a few various ones out there which we recommended, and we pushed it across onto that site. And then we wrote a manifesto. So we wanted to explain to everyone what it is about. It's about how we're creating a low impact site. We actually set out sort of 10 rules, and we explained what the rules are. We sort of outlined the issue about the UK and about how much energy things use as well, thinking about, the imagery, the typography, but then that's it. What was I going to say? So yes, how all the data is being compressed as well. And that was the sort of the benchmark really for the site. And it started getting used. The students embraced it. They started putting stuff up as well. Actually, they started thinking about, well, what is the image? Do I really need that image? you know, as creatives, we always want to put loads of images everywhere, and it's like, you know, can you sum it up in 2? Can you sum it up in 3? And that sort of takes us to the time, and that's where I'm going to leave it. But just remember, create great.
Thank you so much, David. That was absolutely fascinating. I was glued to the screen, and I'm sure our online audience was as well. So many interesting reflections in there, and with that last message that you've ended on, keep it simple, make it great, is such a fantastic kind of motto to have when coming to designing like platforms like websites and different aspects, and thinking about how to minimize but still create that impact that you have. And it's such a brilliant showcase of collaboration, showing all the kind of insights that you got to then come up with those sustainable innovations which were brought into the design of the website as well. So thank you so much for that. And I did not know that blue consumes 35%, approximately 35%. That's quite something. Like so it's good to kind of really be aware of different colors and their impact. Do you know where people can find more data on this to know which colours steer? We know about like dark mode and white consumes the most energy, but how about the colours in between, for example?
I'm sure there'll be lots of data available, which we dig out and we share. It's very much, as I said, Matt and Christine working with the design team, and it's when it came up, we're like, "Are you sure?" And like we triple checked it, and we looked from Google and other things, but also thinking about, you know, something we do with every, you know, when we talk about branding as well, about accessibility within colors. But yeah, for some reason the blue seems to use more, and maybe if there's a web expert out there, a color who would tell you about the red RGB breakdown, that the blue uses more energy to come across.
That's fascinating. And it also, I think it's absolutely incredible that you've created the manifesto as well. So this learning is kind of collected and stored and is accessible in that way, so that yeah, all the hard work that sometimes goes into a design process isn't documented. So yeah, I think that's really incredible to see as well. So now what I'd like to do is take some questions from our audience. So the first question I have, so this question I was thinking was, could you highlight any particularly noteworthy insights or valuable lessons that emerged regarding sustainability as a result of these case studies?
Let's have a think. Well, the web one, definitely. We as I said, the green host and the fonts, things like that. That was really, you know, as creators, we want to use this font, but just thinking about the weight. So having learned that, really, it's almost when we start, you know, on projects, it's like, okay, we haven't designed a brand totally in Arial yet, but I reckon in the next 5 years we'll crack it with the studio, and it just be a system font. But very much the colors, the typography, the loading time, the hosting, image resolutions as well. You know, everyone wants to put loads of big images up, content delivery networks and things like that within exhibition space. And I suppose it goes back to the, you know, physicality things. We always ask clients when they go, oh, can we have this? Can we have that? It's like, do you really need it? You know, especially when it comes to things like merchandise. And, you know, do you really, it's something we're always question, do you really need that water bottle? Do you really need a t-shirt? You know, what we like to do, and we talk to clients, and we're talking with a client at the moment, is like, let's think creatively about it. Let's think, you know, what we would do. Why don't we create an edition? Do you create 20? And then you haven't got a cupboard full of unused items. They become, oh, right. Oh, I missed out on that. Oh, don't worry. We'll create another 10. So, you know, that's the whole point of the talk, is that creative thinking. As designers, we need to do it as much as possible. I saw something, and I'm not going to mention who it is, but I saw something on Instagram where they've opened up a new, so it's a college, a new sustainable show, and they've used vinyl. And I was like, oh, you should come to the talk, because you've done exactly what every creative would do. Go to something easy rather than, thinking about it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, that's really true. Thank you so much for sharing that, David. Yeah, it's really interesting to hear your thoughts on that. And then also we've had some questions on where people can find the manifesto directly. Is that open to the public to view?
I believe it is. If not, we can definitely share it across with everyone.
Brilliant. And then I've got some other questions, maybe one for you, Francis, potentially. So how do we tackle sustainability, ensuring longevity on physical design work when design and trends change over time?
Gosh, that's a tricky one, actually. Can I answer another question, first of all, about the learning? And it's relevant. Yeah, it's relevant to some of the questions that have been coming up and about accessibility on the site. But one of the things that we did learn as we were going through and developing a sustainable website, or a website that you had a much lower footprint, was that actually many of the things that you do to ensure a site is sustainable also are very good when you're looking at accessibility as well. So I'm not sure that Without Form is a kind of perfect example of accessibility, because it doesn't take into account things like screen readers, but actually many of the visual things that you do are think good for accessibility as well. Alicia, you asked me, how do we think about longevity in terms of the physical form? Well, you think really hard and you really make sure that what a client, if you're going to create something physically for a client, either you do it in such a way as David was talking about, whereby you're using materials that are in use anyway, they can be easily removed. You're not using vinyls, which are plastics, which are going to be just thrown away. You're really thinking about something that has a longevity to it, and you're really trying to persuade people. So we do some work in exhibitions, and you're trying to persuade people not to use kind of one-off pop-up banners, but to think about their exhibition design as modular, that they can reuse, that they can have made into materials. We do work like that as well, so that they're not throwing those objects away at the end of the exhibition, because that is a huge challenge, the amount of stuff that's disposed of after an exhibition is held.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's really true. And I think there's a really kind of great need for focus in that side of things, because of the kind of short lifespan generally of that tiny short lifespan of exhibitions. So really thinking about modularity and materials and different components to a design so that it can be reused is absolutely essential. So thank you so much for that. So we're pretty much at the end of the session. We might have time for one quick last one, if I can squeeze it in. What have we got here? I'm curious to hear if the students received any sustainability related subjects, knowledge applied to post-school projects such as packaging design and value chain of an app platform, choosing sustainable materials, for example.
I'm not quite sure I understand the question fully, but I think that the London College of Communications does do a lot of work in sustainability, so that they are kind of trying to add those to their modules and to what they're talking about. So I think that is part of their learning. It wasn't really something we were involved in. We did hold a workshop talking specifically about this particular work with students, but we're not sort of over what London College of Communications do in terms of their sustainability.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for that, Francis. So That's us at time. That was such a interesting session, so much value, so many tangible tips in there in terms of thinking about digital and sustainable elements in designing a website as well. So thank you for that. And we also, on the education element, and we have a session at the very last session at the end of tomorrow, which is about the future of education and different aspects in there as well. So that might be interesting in regards to that question to follow on from what Francis was saying. So you can hop onto the next how-to stream, which is about how to build a green website over on the main stage. And I'll see you at one of the next sessions. Thank you so much.